I'm Dr. Imani Brown, the Director for the Social Equity Program for the City of Los Angeles, Department of Cannabis Regulation. Welcome to this webinar, sponsored by the Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance Program. BLC programming is designed to assist social equity applicants in the City of Los Angeles as they navigate through their entrepreneurial journey. Now, I will be your moderator for tonight's session. This installment of our 2024 Spring and Summer webinar series focuses on access to capital and fundraising. Now, before I get started, let's take a minute to review some housekeeping rules. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed only on DCR's Learning Management System after the editing process. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during this session. However, you will be able to see and hear all the panelists. There is an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information. Please use caution when sharing personal information in a public forum and keep your questions focused on tonight's topic. Please ask questions about tonight's subject matter in the Q&A box. We are gathering and responding to your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session where you will also get responses in the last portion of tonight's event. You are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen. If you use the Q&A box for questions, everyone will be able to see the questions when they are answered. Finally, please note that tonight's content was not created by the Department of Cannabis Regulation or the City of LA, and is for informational purposes only. This information is subject to change and does not replace or supersede the Los Angeles Municipal Code, nor constitute legal advice. If you have specific questions outside of tonight's topic, please call 213-978-0738 during business hours, which are Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., or speak to a DCR representative. And now, our subject matter expert for this evening is Jake Kuzarak. He is an investor, consultant, founder, and mentor and advisor within the cannabis industry. As a member of the NCIA's Cannabis Manufacturing Committee, he regularly hosts webinars focused on the intersection of product and policy. With 4+ years of experience serving as managing director of Founder Institute San Francisco Accelerator Program, he has deep experience helping startups to fundraise and scale. He is based in Los Angeles. Jake, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for having me. It's a pleasure to be back here with all of you on tonight. Of course, this is the Access to Capital webinar. So please, if you have any questions about the fundraising process or my tips and tricks, don't hesitate to drop them into the comments below for the Q&A. We will answer these questions, of course, after I wrap up. And once again, fundraising tips and tricks. Let's kick things off, Cairo. Let's do it. And of course, tonight we will be covering a little bit of background on me, kind of key elements to include in your pitch deck, some hands-on tips about finding investors, a little bit of final guidance, and the Q&A portion. Let's do next. All right. So here's a little bit about me. I was formerly with the ArcView Group, the largest and oldest cannabis investor network. I'm sure some people know Troy Dayton. He's a big policy expert. Steve D'Angelo, of course, also started Harborside, in addition to, his work, obviously, with Last Prisoner Project and, and similar Emerald Growers Association. But the big question is, what did I do wrong? Now, we can go back to it real quick. That's right. So this is a key to just a little exercise. We start a deck here, but there are way too many different font styles. There are way too many different, some things are underlined, some things are bold, some things are italics, some things are, of course, in huge font at the top of the page. This is exactly what you do not want in a deck. You want it to look like this beautiful DCR branded presentation in which everything is branded. It's clear and concise. Let's move on to the next slide there. So yeah, starts to look sloppy if you have too many different fonts, too many different styles. The last thing I would really say there is a good rule of thumb is to limit yourself to just three. Yeah, it's three total fonts across, and that includes different sizes. So one for heading, one for body, one for highlight is typically what I like to suggest here. Here's some of the companies that I've worked with in the past. There. Um, not too much content on this page, but of course, if you're familiar with any of these, let me know. Let's move on. I'm an investor, consultant, advisor, ran an accelerator, do a lot of mentoring and advising in the space. And this is probably the most important slide of my entire presentation, but what must a pitch deck include? So there are a lot of resources out there. So Slide Bean is my favorite. I've included a link to their ultimate presentation guide in the deck, and of course we'll share that as well. But they've aggregated what Guy Kawasaki, what accelerators like 500 startups and Andreessen Horowitz, or other startup accelerators, and just different top firms really look for. What slides need to be in a deck. So you can use this graphic here if there's anything you're unsure about, but that same flow of problem, solution, why now, product. I mean, that's the flow that typically investors will want to see. And if it's not in this format, they're often going to wonder, where is that information? And you'll have to redo it anyways. Let's move on. Okay, so of course, the key to a deck, as I've kind of mentioned, is having it be well branded, well designed. I really think it's important to take time and prep this now before you put anything in front of an investor. So see here, SlideBean has a bunch of templates as well, even real world examples of decks that have worked for large companies. You'll see some examples as we get a little bit through the deck here. But the big question is, what makes or break a deck? Like I said, it's the branding. Some of that's high res images, but you want to make sure you're not just pulling random images off the web. Yes, there are clip art. There's random things out there that can help get your point across, but investors want to see your actual product. They want to see your brand. They want to see your team members. They want to see real people here. So if you're getting a logo or images from a partner, ask them for the highest res you can get a proper vector images that you can use for digital presentations. And you're going to want to have these consistent fonts. So if I had a nickel for every deck that has one slide, just a huge paragraph, tons of text on it, 12-point font, and then the next slide is in 14, the next slide is in 8. These are very small things that you can clean up, today that'll make your deck look a lot cleaner. So it's very important to not have any errors. I know investors that have decided to pass on a project because they found misspellings and they found, just small issues like that. So this is a great rule of thumb, of course, is to, of course, double check it, give it to your friends to double check, give it to other people in your network to double check. Of course, your friends and family often like to shoot you, to tell you everything is great. So it's really worth taking the time and making sure you have a fresh pair of eyes looking it over. So the best thing you can do, of course, is socialize with other people in the program, socialize it with other people in your same shoes who are also fundraising. I think you can be each other's greatest resources here, help each other poke holes. And of course, a strong team slide. This can really make or break a deck. There's a ton of investors that one of their biggest decisions they're going to make is, has this team brought a product over the goal line before? Have they had a successful exit? Do they have the industry chops and connections to be successful and pull this off? So if you have a rock solid team that has brought projects to exit before, it might even be worth repositioning your team slide, moving it a little bit earlier in the deck, making sure it's one of the first things investors are going to see. And of course, the amount of decks that forget a clear ask, a use of funds. I mean, you need to show these investors that, yes, you want to get them hyped on your idea, but you need to show them that you're going to be a good steward of their capital. If they give you your money, you're not going to blow it on frivolous things. You know where to put every dollar to maximize the value it's going to create. Growth projections are always mandatory. You can express your growth with a hockey stick chart like this. This is, pretty par for the course when it comes to the industry. And of course, the point in the hockey stick in which it, takes off is, of course, that's when you've really hit the tipping point. You've hit that inflection point of having enough initial users, enough initial customers that it's going to rocket ship you up, and you can start making real headway on your idea. You're going to have reliable demand around your idea. And of course, strong points of differentiation. There's the old adage that everything has been done before in every industry. So don't worry about what you're pitching investors. You don't need to hide everything behind an NDA. They've seen it before. So I'd recommend hunting for some of those points of differentiation. Make sure that you're bringing them something that, even if it's not the most unique thing in the world, you're validating why it's a good investment in some other ways here. And of course, there's many investors that will love innovation. They'll see, a beverage product that's using technology for faster absorption. That's the horse they'll want to back. And of course, the last thing to focus on is you. So I'll get into that as we proceed with the presentation. Next slide. Okay. So building the deck, coming into a room with an investor in person, of course, you have the opportunity to give them a handshake, meet them. But most of the time these days, if you're on a Zoom or, webinar, you want to look good. You want to feel good. You want to bring that right energy to the table. The worst thing you can do when surprising an investor, you say you're invited to hop on and give a pitch, is to break right into that pitch. You need to connect with these people, build a personal bond with them. Even if you've had a previous connection with them, reference that. It shouldn't be surprised. You shouldn't be surprised with who's on that webinar. Most of the times, the investor will tell you who's going to be in the room. You can always talk about just anything as small talk, the weather today, what's on Netflix, anything, so they see you as a real person. It makes them a lot harder. Makes it a lot harder for them to say no to you, of course, when you ask them for money. So building that personal relationship goes a long way, even if the deal's wrong for them now. I've had plenty of relationships in which I built a great relationship, got to circle back with them, or they've circled back with me once the timing was right. But yeah, this is an easy way someone can blow a deal is to just go right into it and just hammer them with, I have the best idea in the world. Aren't you going to invest in me? Slow it down. So don't check your phone. Make sure you mute all your notifications, emails, Slack, anything that's going to be buzzing. Make sure you're giving them their undivided attention, because this is your first time usually meeting them. Have questions for investors. Show you've done your due diligence on them the same way they've done it on you. Go to their website, look at projects they've invested in the past that might be similar. Bring that up during your presentation. Explain how that you're going to be better or different than those projects. But most of the big funds out there, if you're slated to give a presentation, it's already been circulated. Everyone at that firm has already taken a look at you, probably your LinkedIn as well. So make sure your LinkedIn is spruced up and accurate with information, your most recent work. Especially if there's big names, big logos that you can put up there. That's what they want to see. Just once more building trust and legitimacy. They might even find your Facebook or Instagram. Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z does this. They have disqualified people for investment because they found something on their Instagram they didn't like. So background checks happen. Do it to them as well. And what have I seen that went right? What have I seen that went wrong? Well, personalized follow-ups. When you get done giving a presentation to a room of people, respond to each one of them with an individual email. I don't mean copy and paste one email and says, hey, Jake, hey, Bob, thanks again for having me. No, make sure it's personal. Add a little personal touch that shows that you didn't just send this to one person, because investors do compare these emails to show who took the time to give this a real thought. So what I've seen wrong before, of course, is people coming in unprepared, not knowing who's going to be in the room. I think it's worth doing a lot of digging. It shows you're being proactive. It shows you're not afraid, to ask them hard questions, because it's got to be a mutual fit both ways. It's really all about confidence here. I'm big into this just because I've seen it play out. If you come in and you build a sense of we're in demand right now, you're one of investor of many that I'm talking to. I'm not even sure that you're the best fit for me right now, but maybe I can give you a first look at the deck. I mean, that's the attitude you kind of want to bring into these conversations. It can't be, oh my God, a meeting with you would mean the world to me. Oh, can I just have a couple minutes of your time? That's not the energy they look for. Let's move on to the next slide. So the average time you'll be tied in with an investor is 5 years if you have a traditional exit, or if a public listing, an IPO. I mean, that's going to be 8 years. So you got to make damn well sure that these investors even if they're angels, if they're a VC firm, whoever they are, they don't need to be your best friends, but you need to be able to get along with them. You need to be able to, have a relationship in which they respect what you're saying. They're not trying to push you around. Look, I had an early startup, and this is a situation that kind of played out for me. I built it with a bunch of friends. We were promised $150,000, for an investor's investment. Then a couple months later, it was 120. And then as we started to push back, it was, well, I only have 50K right now because I've had some problems with my other investments. And unfortunately, when we pushed back and said, hey, this is night and day different from the terms we agreed to, what was his response? Cool, hash it out with my lawyers. This is a real thing that happens. There are predators out there. There are investors who don't know what they're doing. So make sure that you're talking to those who they've invested in as well. You're vetting them both ways. This is cannabis. At the end of the day, be yourself. Don't be afraid to be authentic. Be passionate about what you're passionate about. But keep in mind that a lot of these investors came from real estate, finance, unsexy industries. And you got to kind of adapt a little bit to meet them on their ground. So, some that, like I said, can be how you look, how you talk, and make sure you can kind of speak their language, which we'll get into, of course, as we continue the presentation. But I think Old Pal is a great example of this. Their brand looks really, really sexy branding. They're always doing new things. Their design looks really great and clean. But they know how to play the investor game as well. They've been on both sides of the table. So let's move on to the next slide here. This is a great exercise. If anybody remembers Mad Libs from childhood, my mom used to do them when we were driving in the car. But it's just a fun exercise. If you don't have anything down yet for a full pitch deck, you're still trying to get your ideas down. This is a great exercise. What is the name of your company? What are you developing? What's your audience? What problem are you solving? And what's your secret sauce? Those are kind of the main elements that are in a pitch deck. So think on it, do it in your spare time. It should only take you about 5 minutes, but ultimately I know that you can put something together there that that doesn't just go too deep into buzzwords and jargon, and it's readable. It's something that anybody would understand, from your Uber driver to a big name investor. So if we're talking about the endocannabinoid system or something highly technical like light depth or high pressure sodium lights, keep in mind images are great for explaining what these things are. We're developing X, we're trying to solve Y, we're hitting this audience. Just having this can be enough for you to get started. So, all right, let's get into the slides here. This is the classic Airbnb example. This is an actual deck. This is what they use to raise millions of dollars. The standard has changed a lot over the years, but this is a great example of as streamlined as you can possibly get. You want to include a short little tagline that hits on what you do on your intro slide. I also include your name, the URL of your company, maybe your Twitter or Instagram handle. But many times when you're presenting, investors will take a photo of that first slide just to remember who pitched. So make sure your contact's information on there. And of course, the Airbnb deck. This is going to set the example for what is basic and how can you improve it. So if you can't describe your problem in 7 words, go back and retweak it. I think that's great advice. Problem slide. So with this one, you really want to start with your problem slide. It explains why you're talking to them. It explains the big problem you're solving for. Airbnb solves for pricing problem, a cultural problem, and a technical problem, all 3 at once. And the key here is to keep it simple. I use photos as much as possible. Investors are very visually oriented. Investors spend an average of 6 seconds on each one of your slides. So you got to make sure you're not hitting them with too much text. You want to make sure these are snappy. So big blurbs, huge things of context, cut them out if they're in your deck right now. And so a great thing to do is actually show the product as well if you can. Show the problem. If you're giving a verbal pitch, that I know that can be a little bit harder. But you can use an anecdote. Start your presentation off by explaining, your past work history and how that brought you to realize that, there was flaws in the beverage space. And that's why I'm bringing a beverage market a beverage to market that solved my sleep issues. CBN, it's a breakthrough. Let's start putting this into beverages. You really want to tell a story here. You can also go with a hypothetical. How many people in the room have sleep issues and drink beverages for it, like tea? Well, there's a new answer for you. Jake's new sleep beverage. There's a joke, I think, is a great way to start presentations off and really hook them. It takes gumption to start off with a joke, but I'll tell you, a lot of the investors like it because they're used to hearing the same old pitches, same old structures every day. It can make a big difference if you can say anything that's gonna hook them, make them laugh. Let's do the next slide here. So you immediately need to go from your problem slide into your solution. Every deck needs this flow. Show off some high-res images. You can embed a GIF. I'm very against embedding a video because often it's going to open outside of the deck. They're going to have to navigate off the page. They're going to end up getting distracted by Reddit or emails or something. So I would say don't navigate them away from the deck. Just make sure you can depict everything on these slides, these 12 or so slides. User testimonials are a great way of explaining what your solution actually is. Hey, we just released this pipe. Here's Joe Bob. He said that this is the best pipe he's ever used. You want to paint a picture here of what you're doing versus telling them. Now, I've seen more decks. Let's go on to the next slide here, the product slide. So I've seen too many decks that get caught up in putting points of differentiation and reasons they're better and charts, and everything, that they actually forget about showing what their product is. And that can be an opportunity for you if you're a cultivator. Hey, here's a photo of our grow. We're outside of San Jose. It's X amount of square feet. These are the products we currently manufacture. Here's our logo. You'll hear me talking about logos as much because, as people are scanning your deck, as I mentioned, they only have a couple seconds per slide. You want to stop them in their tracks. So if you can piggyback off of the positive brand recognition of another partner you're working with, like, hey, our facility is only using, advanced nutrients products. Great. You have an exclusive partnership with them. Great. Put the advanced nutrients logo in there. That's something that's going to cause the investor to say, damn, they've pulled off a big name partner. Let's move on. Market validation slide. Glamour metrics. These are absolutely key here. Market validation slides are probably the number one thing that an investor is going to skip, because if they're investing in you, they've probably invested in your same market before. They've invested in cannabis before. So what I would say here is, keep it simple. You can find this market information, market data from a variety of different sources. I've outlined them at the end of the deck. Everything, ArcView used to be great at it. New Frontier was pumping out reports left and right. But these days, independent guys like the Dime and stuff are an Eighth Revolution, are keeping a pretty good tab on this. So, the opportunity here is pretty key to sell an investor that you're worthy of their time. There are many investors that will say, look, this isn't a $10 billion idea within 5 years. I'm not going to touch it. It's not the right fit for me. So be honest about what the size of your opportunity is. And what's more important than you making an educated guess that, oh, we're going to be a $20 million company, is you showing your work. How did you get to that $20 million figure? That's what they want to see. A smart founder can justify the numbers they're getting to. They know that you're taking a shot in the dark. They know it's an early stage startup. So show your work. And don't forget any major comparables. If you're already talking about other players in the ecosystem, don't leave out an obvious one. This is a small industry. The chances are that maybe the investor is already invested in that company. They're familiar with that company, and that can cost you. So let's go to the next one. The business model. This one's super simple, especially in cannabis. Don't reinvent the wheel. How are you going to make money with the money that they've given you? For cannabis, it's often, we have a pre-roll company. We're going to estimate 25% of our business is coming direct to consumer. We have our own website within California. Another 20% is going to come, from a marketplace like Ease, and the remaining 50% is going to be us selling into, SoCal retailers. Our first stores are X, Y, and Z. You just show the demand is there, show that you have purchase orders, show that you have signed agreements. Just like I said, don't try to, reinvent the wheel. Just, play to your strengths. And let's see, for some investors, I mean, this slide can be the only thing that they care about. It just comes back to the question of, how are you going to make me money? Airbnb, of course, their example is the fees they've charged. Super easy. If you're a distro, it's your fees, but also the storage fees, but also the fees to use their credit scoring tool, like Navis and stuff has invoice factoring now. So that's a key one here, but let's move on to competition. This one's really easy. Do a grid. You'll all have a copy of this deck as well. There's actually something I've linked to online to kind of make your own pretty quickly. This one in the bottom here with all these X's, the check marks, always include your company first. Don't leave out anyone that's obvious. Yeah, this is kind of the magic quadrant here. Don't leave out, like I said, an obvious comparison. For instance, why would a headset leave out a BDSA? That can be a big red flag. It shows that you haven't done proper market analysis, or you're trying to hide something from those investors. Never a good fit. So let's see. And of course, if an investor does invest in a projects, that are too big for you, you're going to be, not the right fit. That's okay. They might still have somebody they can refer you to who is the right size. And if you want to, you're tempted to overload this slide, hey, here's why we're better. Here's the numbers that are showing how we're beating our competitors. Those are great, but keep your financials in a separate appendix, a separate deal room. If you're really getting into tons of nitty-gritty information there. Okay. Competitive advantage, underlying magic. This and how you're going to make them money are kind of the key slides in any deck. Why you? Why now? What is your X factor? That's it. How are you better or different? I've been pitched, three beverages this week. Why have you built the better mousetrap? Sometimes this can include team members, using an example of beverages like, hey, my CFO was the former CFO of Red Bull. These are part of your competitive advantage. And if you don't have an answer, that's a big deal. But don't panic. Like I said, everything's been done before. I do want to cover NDAs because, I'm really big on this. This can be one of the easiest ways to turn an investor off. If you're really worried, if there's something proprietary in your deck, your underlying magic is something you don't want shared with an investor, great, don't put it in the deck. Make a separate version that is sanitized, that you feel comfortable if it got into a competitor's hands. But my big thing here is I really wouldn't worry about it. I mean, an investor isn't going to want to sign an NDA because they're going to have to send it over to their legal team. They would be sending thousands of NDAs to their legal team every single week. If every single deck, if they're following the NDAs here. And a lot of investors, honestly, they'll screenshot your deck, they'll screenshot key slides, they'll forward it over to other investors. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. A lot of times investors want feedback from others. Let them get that feedback. Hey, have you seen these guys before? Do you like their model? Great. Let them ask those questions. And let's see. I think that's pretty much it on this slide. Yeah. Don't shove the NDA down their throats. Pretty straightforward. Now, go-to-market strategy. This is 2 to 3 notable tactics you're using to grow the business. And this is a huge point here, but if I see another deck that says, oh, we'll use social media or we'll use influencers to make our money, that's not the level of detail they're looking for here. Show them those key partnerships. We've partnered with this retail chain. They're going to be in all of our stores by this date. We did a collab with this brand. They're selling it here, here, and here. You got to get specific. And I always wonder, maybe are we too early to put their logo on here? Maybe I've been speaking with like a Harborside about putting my vapes on their shelves, but would they be upset if they saw my logo because that partnership isn't signed yet? Most of the time, if you're worried about it, don't put them in there. There are ways that you can You can shade a partner's logo so you really can't tell who it is, and then you unblur it once the deal is fully signed. I've seen that work before, um, but look, it can really hurt you if you're claiming to have partnerships or something signed that isn't. I had a company that said he was working with Audi. The guy kicked it over to his friends at Audi and said, "Have you heard of the startup?" And he says, "They're not in our system. We're not working with them." And that deal fell apart, and their partnership that they were working on with Audi fell apart. So another little hack you can do is kind of break it down by in talks, in progress, secure, and paid. So you kind of have different levels, explaining these partners, explaining, some of the traction, of course, that you guys have here. Let's move on. When it comes to the team slide, this needs to be really short and sweet. These guys at Airbnb did a lot wrong. There's way too much text here. There's 3 different images. They all have different backgrounds. Take a photo with your team members together. Take separate headshots with the same background. You want this to look really uniform and branded. Same wall, same camera, everything. It feels mature. It feels polished. You don't want this huge paragraph of information. You can include that in supplementary documents. You can link to their LinkedIn or something. But bullet points, logos, that's what you want to see on a team slide. So for me, I would put, Tenacious Labs, it's a manufacturer I used to work for. I'd probably put ArcView because that's a really known logo in cannabis. I'd probably put 500 startups, and I'd put Indiana University, especially if I knew one of the investors that went to IU. So things like patents and IP, you can include those as well, but as bullet points. So let's see here. So another thing you can do, of course, is bolster any of your weak areas with advisors. If your team is rock solid, but maybe you don't have somebody who's sold vapes into retail before. Hey, this is Will. We poached him from Canopy. He's one of our advisors, and he'll join the team after we secure funding. It just shows that you have your bases covered. Just your biggest thing you want to do is don't leave an investor wondering, why don't they have this key area covered? Why are they good at product and finance, but they don't have any marketing people on the team? Like I said, advisors are a really easy way to do this. You don't have to meet with them all the time. You can do it once a month. Some investors want to meet less than that. But there's a lot of templates out there when it comes to securing their involvement. Founder Institute's got one. It's just a little checkbox based on how active they are. And of course, last slide here, close out with your ask. Investors need to know why you're coming to them today. How much money are you seeking? Also, are you looking for advisors? Are you looking for board members? You're looking for key partners? A lot of these things can be expressed on that ask slide to just keep it fresh in their minds. Investors like to screenshot or take a photo of the first slide and the last slide. So not a bad idea to recap in the very end and maybe throw your contact information on there. But the stage of your company, you don't want to usually be name dropping other investors that are currently in on your deal unless you have that permission. Usually you just want to kind of do that verbally. But I would say, key hires can be included that you're trying to make. People use a pie chart a lot of the time for depicting use of funds, X amount to marketing, X amount to team, X amount to insurance. It's not a bad idea. It shows that once again, you're explaining how to deploy that capital. And I'll skip the closer. It's just your final team slide. Give them your name and contact information again in case they take a photo of it. All right. So this is what I was talking about earlier, because this is that exact same Airbnb deck, but it's been given to a professional design team. Look how sexy this is. It's branded high-res images using the same fonts, same font sizes. This is investable. Their old deck, not as much, not anymore, at least. Back in 2011, okay. How do you do design? There's a lot of people you can follow. There's the Webby Awards. You can find people on Fiverr. This is California. There's a lot of designers who've moved out here, especially in LA and in San Francisco Bay Area as well. If you need any of these resources, I can help. Let's do a quick little next slide. This is a PowerPoint template. Yep. PowerPoint that you already all have on your computer has some pretty damn sleek templates. These are some of the design firms out there. Fiverr, like I said, Wonder Dogs, AKQA is like a super expensive one that like Audi would use. 72 and Sunny are local to SoCal. I like those guys. And 99 Designs. Next slide. But there are tools. Gen AI. I made a logo for my friend of mine's advocacy group that does disabled rights access in cannabis. I went to Logo AI. It was incredibly helpful for me to just kind of type in the language I wanted. It displayed a bunch of different logo options. I just made a bunch of small tweaks. And the best part is you can screenshot it. So you don't need to buy the logo, especially if you're running on a shoestring budget until you're ready to. Next slide, please. Canva. I made this little personal deck about myself in Canva. It's the best thing I've ever done. It's helped me get jobs, speaking opportunities. Their templates are awesome, not just for pitch decks, but next slide. Yeah, even for things like flyers. So there's literally tens of thousands of different flyer templates in here that you can work with. So cool. Let's move on. All right, so let's get into some of the tips here. The biggest one that every startup accelerator will teach you is if you screw up, just keep going. Don't ask to reset. Don't apologize. You want to have that confidence, power through. Practice is key. The 30-second pitch, that's kind of your elevator pitch, obviously, because you can give it to somebody if you meet an investor in an elevator. I always recommend, like I said, pitch your Uber driver, pitch everybody about what you're doing, just to make sure that people with different perspectives, different levels of knowledge about your industry, they can understand it. Because at the end of the day, like I said, a lot of these investors do not come from cannabis. Don't forget the personalized follow-ups. It's always absolutely critical here. And getting the intro is step one. There are many firms, your first task in getting a check from them is to get an intro. It's either finding somebody they've invested into in the past, and having them make an intro to a partner, or you meet a partner or something yourself and have them set you up. So that's something to keep in mind, because there's certain firms like that literally is your first challenge to land their check. So cold emailing investors is not the way to go. Find their venture scouts, pitch their venture scouts. These are usually people like myself that are tapped to forward, on behalf of a larger firm, to send over deals that they're seeing that might be a good fit. So you can usually find them on LinkedIn, of course. I have a hyperlink to Big Willie G. I love this guy because he pitched that startup grind back in like 2012, but I still think about it. Essentially, he's a guy who went on stage, just screamed, I'm having so much trouble until I just developed this perfect solution. Everybody at that conference was talking about this guy because of that energy, because of that scream. So sometimes don't be afraid to step outside the box and do something super creative to hook investor interest, especially if it's at a live pitch event. Over web might not be so good. But I mean, this is stuff that even, I have experience with. I had a past company I was working with. I mean, our co-founders went into a pitch meeting wearing a pink t-shirt and flip-flops. The investor was wearing a blazer with gold buttons, and needless to say, we didn't land their check. Let's go to the next slide here. Where do I find money? Well, there's a lot of people with a Venture Scout title, but they're really low-hanging fruit. You can just basically ask them, I have a great idea. Can you put me in front of the fund? They'll ask for your deck, usually in an email with a couple bullet points at the top. That'll hook them and make them wanted to forward it along. So that's how a lot of this stuff works. It's investors, it's people, from angels to bigger firms, just forwarding decks around. Sometimes, like I said, it's for feedback. Sometimes it's because, they're brokers and they want to cut. Mentors and advisors can be good, especially when, the firms are tied up in a lot of accelerators. There's lots of debt out there, in cannabis. There's Fund Canna, Bespoke Capital. The big thing to keep in mind is these firms, anybody issuing debt for the most part is going to need revenue, and they're going to need traction. A lot of these deals are like essentially lines of credit. hey, send me a snapshot of your current accounts receivable, and I can tell you how much I'm going to approve you for within 48 hours. So 95% of all deals in cultivation and retail in the last couple of years have been debt, which is shocking. It has been getting a little bit better out there, bigger dormant cannabis investment firms that have been on the sidelines the last couple of years. Maybe they went a bit too hard the last couple of years. Green Access has been deploying. Poseidon's been deploying. Boston Beer Company, the guys who started Sam Adams, they just finished the rest of Uncle Arnie's round. So you never know who's out there as a potential route of new capital. I'm a big fan of accelerators. I went through 500 startups twice. Ease Momentum, I've been a mentor there for all three cohorts. They give you a $50,000 grant. You don't need to pay that back. That's non-dilutive. It's strictly for BIPOC founders. It's kind of a social equity focused accelerator. And of course, I was the managing director of Founder Institute San Francisco. That's a really good fit for early stage companies, usually pre-seed. And there's a lot of good mentors in that network that are interested in giving back with feedback, but also investing. And at the end of the day, you can ping investors via email, but LinkedIn, I think often is a little bit of a better route. They're not going to want your whole pitch right off the bat. You guys just want to build that trust first. So let's move on. Equity crowdfunding has been surprisingly popular. There's Seed Invest, Micro Invest. I invested in Backyard Sodas on Micro Invest after meeting those guys. Even in Europe, there's been some big success stories. I think I saw a UK CBD marketplace raise 2.5 million on a Swedish crowdfunding site. There's Republic, Uncle Arnie's just did a crowdfunding campaign before they closed all that Barney's beer money. A lot of these crowdfunding sites, the best practice here is to have your own little war chest so you can seed your campaign internally, show that there's traction on it, and don't just leave it up to it's going from zero to finished. That's the dirty little secret to how a lot of these platforms work. SPVs are a great route for collecting smaller checks, investors who can't meet your minimum amount. For instance, Wonder, has the beverage company, they've fundraised this way. Maps did an SPV, and people who run cannabis VC firms, like my good friend Helene Servian, she runs a lot of SPVs. So does Annie Davis, Jen Pyro. So these special purpose vehicles, these can be very good in tight financial climates in which investors don't quite have the war chests they're used to play with. There's a lot of pitch events out there. Okino's does one in DC. Pitchforce is Max Shapiro's up in San Francisco. ArcView is not really doing it as much anymore. I know Benzinga might be, and MJ Unpacked might be. Just talk to people who've gone through it before. At the end of the day, a lot of these pay-for-play ones can be a mixed bag, but some of them can bear fruit. And ask for intros. If you've had a friend raise money before, just had success with an investor, do not be afraid to say, how did you do that? Can I talk to them as well? Yeah, warm intros will help a lot more than cold intros. You also want to learn the tips and tricks of what an investor thinks about. What is a 2 and 20? What is an investor's day-to-day looks like? How do they make their money on all of these deals? What sort of multiples on their investments are they looking for? Is it 7x, 5x, 10x? So at the end of the day, you don't know till you try. It's worth taking the risk and asking for those intros. High net worth angel investors, especially people who just sold their companies, man, these are a really good source of new capital. Crypto money has historically been pretty hit or miss. Recently, probably better than it's been. I even know a cannabis company that got a crypto protocol, like a blockchain. Yeah, they basically said, we'll give you $2.5 million if you go out and build a track and trace system for us. So crazy. This stuff does happen, from unexpected sources. There's a lot of crypto money in Silicon Valley. Green Label, the SoCal-based manufacturer, they had DeMar DeRozan, the basketball player, as one of their angel investors. A lot of family offices, especially international. They've been sitting on a lot of dry powder and are ready to deploy. It can be hard to get into the right rooms as investors, but you guys remember Green Street, who had that big building downtown? You know what they were doing? They were talking about building a cannabis co-working space, a big office building in downtown LA at Soho House. A bunch of really rich guys at the adjacent table heard what they were talking about, and they said, look, go find that building. I'll buy it, because they know that they can sell that building for a profit, most likely down the road. You never know, who can end up, being somebody that's worth approaching. So being in those right rooms can sometimes be absolutely everything. And you're going to be exciting to a lot of these guys because cannabis is buzzy. Bootstrapping, great opportunity here. Don't take any investor money. The old adage is you want to grow as far as you can. You want to hit your first milestone with the least amount of investor money. Some of the best companies in the world bootstrap and then maybe eventually reach a point in which they'll take some money. And you better believe that when they do, they're in the power position when it comes to dictating the terms that they're looking for. Let's see. Friends and family money. I am big on this as well. The close rate of friends and family money is over 50%. It's less than 10% for any, traditional, venture investor or similar. Look, 90% of companies fail in the first 5 years. The one thing that you can keep in mind that is a helpful tip is 70% of companies were still rolling after 5 years if they had a mentor. So I'll touch on that in a second, but really having people, surrounding yourself with a network of people who've been through this race before, they know how to talk to investors, can go an incredibly long way. It's including with the people in this very group. So let's see, grants are becoming a thing. The NIH grant, there's been a bunch of these. I know a Michigan R&D company. I've seen environmental groups. There's basically a beverage manufacturer and retailer in Vermont that got a couple million from, the state for preserving access to water rights. So these things can be very worth looking into. I mean, Day 3 Labs got $1 million from the state of Israel for Parkinson's research for their emulsion, which their accelerator then matched. And going viral, scaling too fast can kill your startup. So I do encourage checking out that post that I've hyperlinked, especially if your site goes down, you have too much demand. Some special tips for BIPOC founders. A couple good ones here. Equity Trade Network, Nina and Ramon have been doing a lot of work there. They've had a separate little booth at the last Hall of Flowers. They're in the Bay Area, of course, as well. Hillary is doing our academy. It's kind of more tied in with New York right now, but there's still her teachings available. Bridge Events is another great one for women. Let's do next slide. ArcView has its Women Inclusion Network, Women Investor Network. Ease Momentum is still a thing as of now. I created a guide, which is hyperlinked on my final slide. I'll drop it into the chat when the Q&A starts, but it's just a bunch of links to a lot of what I've been mentioning here. Your network is the greatest strength. The biggest thing I saw the value coming out of groups like this, out of either the DCR or a 500 startups or a Founder Institute, whatever, is that the people in the companies held each other accountable. Even months down the road, they would, get on a webinar, get on a Zoom together. Maybe they'd go for a walk, have a smoke, whatever. Maybe they would just, set up a shared Slack or WhatsApp group. But just having other people in that same boat as you to talk through your problems, can go just it's the most valuable way to build a company. Do not go it alone. Go it with friends. If you do not have a co-founder, I would highly recommend it. There are many investors who will not invest in you if you do not have a co-founder. As many investors say, if you can't convince someone to become your co-founder, you can't convince me to invest in you. So let's move on. Rebel is great as well. Hall of Flowers has been giving out a lot of grants. NCIA has a DEI committee. There's a bunch of different resources there. And I love the work that, M4MM and MPP are doing, mostly on the lobbying side. So I don't do much with Normal. I hear really good things about the LA chapter. But there's been, like I said, a lot of different resources out there. FlowHub just published a guide of connections to, different investors and similar. Um, but that's it. That's it. The next slide here is where do we get some of the data, the training, the resources. I mentioned Eighth Revolution earlier. Headset, Brightfield, Hoodie, Pistol, Oasis Intelligence. Oasis Intelligence is all consumer data. It's all qualitative instead of quantitative. Their free reports are good. And I love New Cannabis Ventures. They're always reporting on big deals. Day Truong, Highly Objective is the name of his newsletter. He recaps everything going on every week. Viridian still does their deal recap emails, sort of. But all of this can be used to help build momentum. Hey, investor, this grow right down the street from mine just got landed this investment. Let's talk. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. So if there are any questions, let me know.
Okay, that was fantastic, Jake. So let's get right into the Q&A section. Thank you so much. Okay, first up, with so many people seeking capital, Jake, do you have any tips for things that I can do to get potential investors to prioritize my meeting? I can have a nice presentation and a pitch, but if other priorities keep beating me to the punch, this isn't very helpful. So what can I do to help investors prioritize my presentation?
Yeah. Typically bribes work. I'm just kidding. So everything has been done before. And so who is first typically won't matter to investors. So you can don't have to worry about that. But if you want to be on the top of the pile, it's what I said earlier. You need somebody they've invested in previously or someone who works at that firm to push you internally and say, hey, these guys are who you want to talk to. You're powerless here. It's up to those that they already trust. It's up to those that they, you can't establish your own legitimacy just by hyping yourself. I mean, it'll help, but you really need, an unbiased third party to say, these guys are the real deal.
Okay. Next question. Do you know of any resources for practicing public speaking in a business setting? I am a sole owner and do not have public speaking or presenting skills very well.
Yeah, believe it or not, a lot of people do improv. And in LA, you can find a million different little improv classes and stuff. Toastmasters is actually still big, still pretty important, especially in the LA area. I always recommend recording yourself. Watching yourself back, you can realize how many times you say is a big one. Service providers, they love rating Reddit and offering up a lot of free consulting. So r/startups, r/entrepreneur. Sometimes they can give you feedback on your pitch, but also just, they'll go through your deck, they'll go through your concept here, and they'll share some direct feedback. So yeah, pretty much.
So how do you maintain a good relationship with investors post-funding?
Yes. And Gloria, just to clarify, co-founder, not founder. You're the founder. But how do we maintain a good relationship? Hey, transparency. That's 100%, is just being an open book with your investors and not trying to BS them. Their whole day is listening to people that they've invested in, try to, bend the truth a little bit. If you can be really transparent, they know that you're reliable, that you're not hiding from them. You're hosting regular check-ins. Hey guys, I'll hold an optional check-in once a month. You can listen to this. Invite anyone from the firm that wants to be here. I'll run through, all the stuff we're working on. And look, if you can't make it, I'll send out a mass email to all of my stakeholders anyway that recaps everything we've been working on the last couple months. This is a really, really good practice to get into. Even if you haven't closed your first investor and you have some advisors you're talking to, some potential partners, some friends and family, just, spend 5 minutes, have an email that says, in the last couple months, here's some milestones we've hit. Here are some things we're working on. Here are some things we need, And it's email is best for this because once again, it gives them the ability to just forward it along if there is somebody who could, potentially be a fit. Don't make investors repeat themselves if they give you if you give you guidance. I've seen this happen time and time again where they're like, on our last meeting, we talked about you doing this. Why have you not done it yet? And if you don't have a good reason and then you're just, oh, I forgot to, doesn't really look great. So you want these updates, like I said, distilled down to the most relevant points. Investors are working on too much on a daily basis. You want to make sure everything is concise as possible. And yeah, have your co-founder there with you if you have one. Otherwise, take great notes.
Great answer. Okay, next question. How can I determine a reasonable valuation for my company?
This is a great question, which I'm sure everyone has on their minds.
Right.
For everyone on this webinar, I don't want to just say this with a blanket statement, but unless you're at like the Series A or beyond level, you probably don't need to be concerning yourselves with this, with evaluation at a pre-seed or seed stage company. Look, at Series A, it might make sense, but it's mainly, at this pre-revenue or limited revenue stage, it's mainly just educated guesswork. If you go out there and somebody says, look, I'll give you, $15,000 for 5% of your company, that means your company's worth $300,000. You have put a valuation onto it because you took straight equity. But what most people would suggest here is to take these initial checks when it's still at an early stage as a convertible note or a safe agreement. Y Combinator was the one who really popularized the safe agreement, but it's a free template. And it's, basically a version of a convertible note that has additional protections in place for you as the founder. It lets you set a valuation cap, which means, hey, if the investor agrees to these deal terms, whatever amount of money they give you is going to convert into X amount of equity upon hitting, this specific milestone. But their equity, of course, if it's tied to a lower valuation, it's going to be worth more. That's where that cap comes it comes in handy. But like I said, you shouldn't go out and engage a CFO to go out and do a valuation on your company if you're still working on your pitch deck. So
This is great. This is somewhat of a follow-up question. How do I know how much money to ask for?
yeah, the old adage here is a solid 18 months of runway, especially in these early stages. This is where a CFO actually can really help you, is to go out there, look at how much money you're burning every single month, your burn rate. Look at how much you have in the bank. Look at, factor in any unexpected, issues that could happen. Maybe a little 20% buffer for that, and and project out how long can I survive. If I have $500,000, will that take me 18? Will I be able to operate for 18 months? Because what a lot of investors feel is 18 months is a perfectly sufficient amount of time for you to find product market fit, and for you to be ready by the end of that process to raise your next round.
Okay, next question. What are the most common private lending terms? Will investors need to be added to financial stakeholders with DCR?
It's pretty flexible in cannabis. I mean, you have everything between, let's call it 5 to 20%. 10, 11 can be pretty high or pretty reasonable because cannabis and a lot of these firms like to kind of gouge you because you are cannabis. But it all depends on what sort of loan this is. If it's like, I'm, pulling out $1 billion to go buy some real estate, it's a lot different than I need a short-term cash infusion, basically, a line of credit, while I'm waiting for some accounts receivable to finally hit. So yeah.
Okay, next question. What are some alternative forms of investment?
Oh yeah, we're just kind of what we're talking about: line of credit, debt, equity crowdfunding. There is, revenue-based investing, which is kind of like a line of credit. It's basically just an investor saying, I'm going to take a portion of your profits and instead of just, waiting until we reach the point. If you're a really cash heavy business and you don't worry about, what that looks like, then great. You can siphon a little bit off for that investor. But at the end of the day, like, it's most of what you should be looking for at this stage is, you know, early stage, so seed or, potentially pre-seed or potentially Series A investors. And they're going to say they're going to expect a convertible note, or a safe agreement. If they see anything else, they'll probably be a little bit like, have they talked to anybody yet?
Next question. I am an extremely independent entrepreneur. Do I really need a co-founder?
No, so yeah, I'd say, Y Combinator is a big startup accelerator, like 500 startups. And for years, they would say, we don't allow anybody into it's very prestigious. They give you, a couple $100,000 to start your business. And for years, they would say, we are not going to let anybody in that doesn't have a co-founder. And they started to kind of bend the rules a little bit, in which maybe they'll let in one solo founder, but they've been heavily vetted, and it's usually a solo founder that's had an exit before, that's put themselves through the ringer. I am very big on having a co-founder as a startup founder, because I've been a startup founder before. It is an incredible amount of work. You don't just need somebody to help share the work with you. You need somebody that you can just commiserate with, and, and celebrate your wins with together, and, figure out how to course correct in the event of a loss, or any big issues. To me, a co-founder is the best thing you can possibly do for yourself as a founder, is to go out and find somebody that believes in this just as much as you do, that can help lighten that load. And look, it's fun too. Say you close your first big check, you're at MJ Biz in Vegas, you want to be there with somebody celebrating that. So if you're fiercely independent, there's nothing wrong with that. I've met a lot of great companies that were started by a solo founder. Of course, very quickly, they started to add senior hires in key positions. A lot of times with early stage company, you don't have the capital. You don't have the bank account to go out there and add a CTO. So adding a CTO caliber person as a co-founder / CTO is your way to get them to start working for you, give them that equity, and be part of the founding team, because there's no way you're going to be able to pay their salary.
Okay, this is a second part to that.
Sure.
As an independent entrepreneur, where can I find a mentor or advisor?
It's a great question. Honestly, organizations like this, it can be so powerful. I'm really, really big on events. LA and California in general, our events blow the rest of the country out of the water. I'll say that, and I'll stand by it. I've been to events in most states that have a mature market, including New York. It's a lot of people who do not know what they're doing, and a lot of people who want to be part of the green rush. California, our events are full of people who've been through the ringer before, who have had successes and failures, who have connections in this industry. So everything from, industry trade shows, stuff like Hall of Flowers, to, the champ shows in Vegas, depending on what you're doing, to the California State Fair, which now has cannabis, it has sale, it has consumption, it has a whole competition this year. So I would say outside of that, LinkedIn, and don't be afraid to ask people like myself, who give presentations and speak on fundraising, or brokers, if they have good connections. There's a lot of people in this industry that are super connectors, who are out there, with big networks, and have no problem helping out free of charge. They want to see a better future for this industry. They want to see good people coming together. They want to see projects succeeding. So they'll go out of their way to help you. Don't be afraid to just ask, put up a post. Hey, my company is this stage. I'm looking for a co-founder. I'm looking for an advisor. Do you know anyone who could be a good fit? On your LinkedIn, on your Instagram, on your Facebook, a variety of different sources. But I'd say, I think that's pretty much, accelerators have big mentor networks a lot of the time. I can always, pull a lot of those names of people that I know have been willing to give advice in the past. So yeah, add me on LinkedIn. That can work.
Okay. How can I practice my investor pitch, and are there best practices associated with that?
How did I practice my investor pitch? And I mean, that's, kind of what I was saying earlier about recording it or pitching your Uber driver or getting into little small circles with other founders in pitching. How can you improve it? I mean, just studying what you're doing right and wrong and getting that feedback and implementing that feedback. I always recommend your pitch needs to grow. You start with that quick little elevator pitch, then you get to your 1 minute pitch, then you get to your 3 minute pitch, and then you get to your 5 minute pitch, and along the way, once, you have your 3 minute pretty well baked, you can start using a deck, and you don't have to rely, you're not reading off of every single word on that deck. You're just pitching it because you know it in here. You have it down. When you get to your 5 minute, same thing, you got the deck scrolling behind you, but you got it memorized. One of the biggest turnoffs for investors, I'd say is, especially if you're, just pitching them individually and it isn't like a big demo day, is if you're just reading everything off of a script. They don't want that. They can do that at home. They want to talk to you. Sometimes they'll jump in and ask questions. You got to be prepared to think on your feet. Even if they do something that derails your flow. And like I said, the only way that you're going to get better at that is with just endless repetition. It's welcome back to, middle school or elementary school. We had to learn the school song or the 50 states, it's you have to do that all over again. And unfortunately have that pitch down where you can give it with your eyes closed. So.
Hey, the last question is somewhat different, Jake. Uh, when I'm in front of potential investors, how candid should I get with them with questions of integrity and honorability? I don't want to offend, but I am interested in how they will respond to those types of inquiries.
So this is you're asking the investor about their integrity or vice versa?
Their integrity.
Their integrity, the investor's integrity.
Yes.
Yeah, there's very tactful ways to do this. Hey, I'm not the most experienced, when it comes to the fundraising process. I have a lot of investors and support in my corner helping me out. But, I think one thing that would really make me a lot more comfortable would be if you could tell me a little bit about your firm, how you got started, maybe potentially make an intro to somebody who, you've funded before with a company similar to mine, with a deal a similar stage to mine. They should be willing to be transparent. I mean, if you're on the ball, you've already reached out to some people that they've invested in to kind of do that due diligence beforehand. But look, they're not going to take too much offense to it, especially in because they're going to be kind of asking you the same thing. So, I would say, don't ask them for examples of how they're, trustworthy people. I mean, in a perfect world, you want to see them in practice. You want to, maybe we spoke with them at noon at Benzinga over lunch. Great. Then you make sure you go to the investor happy hour that night, watch them get a couple of drinks in them. Then you see how they talk to you, see how they talk to other people. You can do little things like that and kind of watch these people once they let their guard down, and like I said, just asking around is a great way to do it as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jake. We want to really thank you for your leadership and commitment to advancing access to capital and fundraising with startups and equity entrepreneurs. It's so much needed. So thank you again for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we hope you all enjoyed watching this webinar entitled Access to Capital and Fundraising. If you have questions, please contact dcr.sep@lacity.org or dcrlicensing@lacity.org, or you can contact your licensing analyst directly for questions and information. Don't forget to access the reference material listed in the chat. Thank you all and good night.